I remember the sound before anything else. The oxygen machine humming beside his bed, steady and mechanical like a metronome marking time until the end. My father's breathing came in uneven gasps, his chest rising and falling under the weight of 15 years of sickness. Outside, winter had already settled over Minnesota, blanketing the small town in silence. Inside, silence felt heavier, not peaceful, but strained, as if the air itself carried the echoes of all the things we never said. He had been my anchor for so long, the one person who loved without condition, even when I didn't make it easy. And yet, when I looked around that hospice room I'd set up in my home, I couldn't stop thinking about how much he'd suffered, not from the illness, but from her. My mother, the woman who had spent decades convincing the world she was a saint while turning our lives into something unrecognizable behind closed doors. She wasn't there in his final hours. Not that it surprised me. She'd only ever shown up for things that benefited her, photo ops, public sympathy, moments she could twist into her narrative of the poor, devoted wife trapped with a sick man. But in reality, she had long checked out of the marriage, long before the machines and medications. I used to think maybe she just didn't know how to love him. Now I know better, she only knew how to take. When Dad first got sick, she played the part of the caretaker. She cried in front of neighbors, begged for sympathy online, even started a support fund that, as I later discovered, she quietly spent on herself, hair, clothes, dinners out with friends. He was too tired to fight her, too loyal to call her out. And I was too young, too confused to understand the games she played. But years went on, and I learned. I learned what manipulation looks like when it wears perfume and fake tears. I learned what neglect sounds like, silence during dinner when he asked for help, and she pretended not to hear. I learned how cruelty hides behind a smile when she mocked him for needing assistance to walk. When I finally got power of attorney after his second major hospitalization, it felt like the smallest piece of justice. He wanted me to handle his accounts, his care, everything. She hated that. She said I was turning him against her, that I was stealing her husband. But the truth was simple. She had abandoned him years ago. I was just helping him survive what she'd left behind. The last week of his life, I barely slept. I kept the house warm, played his favorite old country records, made sure the hospice nurses were gentle. I wanted him to feel safe. And when he finally passed early on December 1st, I felt an ache so deep I thought it might never leave me. But beneath that grief, buried under the tears and exhaustion, something else stirred, a quiet, uncheckable resolve. I had promised him peace, and I intended to give him that, even if it meant destroying the illusion my mother had built for decades. The funeral home called the next morning. "We need your mother's consent for cremation," they said. I gripped the phone tighter. "Why? Legal next of kin protocol," the director replied gently. "Even though you have power of attorney, she's still his spouse on paper." That word spouse made my stomach twist. She hadn't been his spouse in any way that mattered for years, but laws didn't care about emotional truth. So I called her. She answered on the third ring, voice sugary and sharp all at once. "Oh, so you finally decided to tell me something?" I bit back my anger. "They need your signature to proceed with Dad's cremation." She laughed, an actual laugh. "Cremation? Absolutely not. He deserves a proper burial." "He wanted to be cremated," I said evenly. "He told me that himself. It's in writing." "Well," she said, her tone suddenly colder, "maybe he changed his mind. You know how he was." I could feel my jaw tighten. "He didn't change his mind." She paused, then sighed dramatically. "Fine. What's in it for me?" I almost dropped the phone. "Excuse me?" "Don't act surprised," she said. "I know about the survivor benefits. You can have your little cremation, but I'm keeping those checks." I stared out the window at the frozen yard, wondering how the woman who raised me could sound so empty. They're yours anyway, I said quietly. No one's taking them? She hummed, satisfied. Good, then I'll sign. Send it over. Click. That was it. No condolences. No, I'm sorry for your loss. Just a transaction. 2 days later, his body was cremated, and I arranged a small memorial, family, and a few friends, people who actually cared. I wrote the obituary myself. Every word felt like a thread of truth sewn into the fabric of his story. And when I reached the part where most obituaries mentioned survived by his loving wife, I stopped typing she wasn't loving and she wasn't surviving him. She'd already lost everything that made her human long ago, so I left her out entirely. No mention, no acknowledgement, just his name, his life, and the people who truly mattered. The morning it was published, my phone started buzzing, cousins, old family friends, even her church acquaintances. Why wasn't her name included? Was it a mistake? Is everything okay? She called me that night, screaming, "How dare you humiliate me like this?" People are asking questions. Then maybe, I said, you should tell them the truth. You ungrateful little. I hung up before she finished. It was the first time I realized how calm I felt. The next morning, the house felt colder than usual. Not because of the weather, but because everything inside it reminded me of him. His mug on the counter, still faintly smelling of coffee. His slippers by the bed, the indentation on the pillow where his head used to rest. I should have boxed everything up right away, but I couldn't. The silence felt sacred, like he was still here somehow. Just out of sight, my phone kept lighting up. Texts from relatives who never showed up when he was alive, now suddenly invested in the drama. Why would you leave your mom out? She's grieving too. That was cruel, cruel. That word kept echoing in my head for 15 years. I'd watched cruelty drip like poison through our home, not in the form of bruises or screaming matches, but in something quieter. Neglect, gaslighting, the slow erosion of dignity. And now, for the first time, people wanted to call me cruel because I told the truth. By the third day, my mother started her campaign. She posted long, weepy Facebook messages about losing the love of her life and how some people couldn't respect his memory. Her friends filled the comments with sympathy emojis and messages like, "Stay strong, queen," and "He's watching over you." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I shared something else. A photo of Dad sitting on the porch. From last summer, sunlight on his face, his hand clutching the oxygen tube. The caption read, "He was the kindest man I've ever known. He deserved peace, not pain. No names, no accusations. Just truth." The comment section split in half. Some said beautiful words. Others asked, what really happened? And then one message stood out from a woman named Marianne, a neighbor from years ago. "I remember how he used to wait outside for rides because your mom wouldn't drive him anymore. He deserved better." That one comment broke something open. People began remembering. One by one, little cracks appeared in the image my mother had built. She called again that night. Her voice was cold steel. "You think you can destroy me with your little posts?" "I'm not destroying anything," I said quietly. "I'm telling the truth." "You always were dramatic," she snapped. "Do you know how ridiculous you look? Everyone's laughing at you, not me." "I don't care who laughs," I said. "I care that Dad's story is told right." There was a pause. Then the venom. "You'll regret this." Click. That night, I didn't cry. I sat by the fireplace and read through my father's old journal. I'd never really looked inside before. His handwriting was shaky, uneven, each word pressed deep into the paper as if carved by pain itself. One entry stopped me cold. March 3rd, 2019. "I hope someday she sees me, really sees me." I think she already sees through me. Maybe Emily will remember me kindly when I'm gone. I pressed my forehead against the page. He knew. He always knew. The next few weeks blurred into paperwork, estate forms, legal phone calls. My mother contested everything: the will, the bank accounts, even the car. She claimed I manipulated him, that I poisoned him against her. Every call from her lawyer was another twist of the knife. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the hospice nurse's words. He looked peaceful in the end. Like he trusted you? That was my anchor when the will was finally settled. She got nothing but her survivor benefits, the one thing she cared about anyway. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. But narcissists don't disappear quietly. She started showing up at family gatherings, crying loudly, saying things like, "I'm just trying to forgive my daughter for what she did." So I stopped going. I chose distance over confrontation. I built a small, quiet life for myself: work, therapy, long walks by the lake. But silence has a way of stirring memories. Every time I saw an old couple holding hands, a pang hit me. That's what he wanted. That's what he deserved. Then came the local newspaper story. They were doing a community feature on hospice care and reached out to me. Said they'd heard about my father's story. I hesitated. It felt personal, private, but something inside me said, tell it. Not for revenge, for truth. I sat with the reporter for 2 hours, telling her everything: the years of quiet neglect, the emotional manipulation, the love my father still carried until the end. She listened, took notes, and promised to handle it with care. When the article was published, it wasn't sensational. It was honest. The headline read, "Daughter honors father's legacy after years of quiet abuse." There were no names, but everyone in town knew. That night, my mother showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She looked smaller somehow, wrapped in a thick coat, her lipstick smudged. "Are you happy now?" she asked, voice trembling. "You've made me a monster to everyone." I stood there, holding the door frame. "You made yourself one, Mom." I just stopped hiding it. Her eyes glistened, but it wasn't sadness. It was fury barely restrained. "He loved me," she hissed. "Maybe once," I said softly, "before you stopped loving him back." She slapped me then, quick, sharp years of rage condensed into one motion. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her and said, "You don't get to hurt me anymore." Something shifted in her expression, not guilt, not regret, but confusion. Like she'd lost control of a game she'd always known how to play. She turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it until the shaking stopped. That night, I burned a candle beside Dad's urn and whispered, "I did it. She can't rewrite you anymore." For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Winter slipped away before I noticed. The snow that once blanketed the yard melted into soft mud and tiny blades of grass. Life, in its stubborn way, kept moving forward. Some mornings I woke up expecting to hear the oxygen machine, the soft shuffle of my father's slippers. But there was only birdsong now, faint and free. I'd started going to therapy again, weekly this time. My therapist, Claire, asked me once, "What would peace look like for you?" I didn't know how to answer. I'd spent so long in defense mode, protecting Dad, protecting myself, that the idea of peace felt foreign. But over the next months, small pieces of it started to appear. In the quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, in the laughter of my coworkers at the clinic, in the realization that nobody was calling anymore to gossip about the obituary. The storm had passed. The silence that followed was finally gentle. One. The letter, one afternoon in early spring, I received a letter in handwriting I didn't recognize. The envelope was old-fashioned, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in careful cursive. "Emily, your father used to come into the library every Wednesday." He told me you were the best thing he ever did right. When he couldn't drive anymore, he called just to ask me to put books on hold for you. He said he loved the way you read. I thought you might like to know that he talked about you every time he came in. Martha, County Library, I read that line again. He loved the way you read. I don't know why, but it undid me. All the grief that had hardened into quiet anger finally softened. I cried until the tears ran dry, then took the letter outside and pinned it to the corkboard above his old workbench. Not as a relic, but as proof that love leaves echoes, even in strangers' memories. Too. The call weeks later, my mother called. I stared at her name on the screen for a long minute before answering. Her voice was flat. I'm selling the house, she said. Do you want anything from it? I pictured the place-peeling wallpaper, sagging porch, the walls that had held both laughter and quiet cruelty. I thought of Dad refusing to leave it because he'd built it with his own hands. No, I said. Nothing from there belongs to me anymore. She was silent for a while. People still ask about you, she said. They think you're cruel? Maybe, I said, but I can live with that. I can't, she whispered, almost too low to hear. You ruined me? I didn't ruin you, I replied gently. I just stopped protecting your lies. She didn't answer. The line went quiet, then disconnected. I stood there, holding the phone, realizing that for the first time, her silence didn't scare me. It freed me. 3. The tree in late May, I planted a tree in the backyard, a red maple, his favorite. The soil was rich and dark, and the air smelled of rain. I dug until my arms ached, then lowered the sapling into place. As I covered its roots, I spoke out loud, more to him than to the wind. You're home now, I said. Not in that house, here, where you were loved. When I stepped back, sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the leaves into little shards of fire. For the first time, the emptiness didn't feel endless. It felt full of memory, of meaning, of something I couldn't name point for. Moving forward that summer, I took a small cabin near Lake Superior. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a deck that looked out over the water. I worked remotely, spent evenings walking along the shoreline. Sometimes I'd bring his urn with me, set it on the railing while the sun dipped low. I'd tell him about my day, about how quiet things had become. One evening I said, "You like it here." Nobody's pretending. The breeze moved through the trees as if he'd heard. The more time passed, the more I understood forgiveness wasn't about excusing her. It was about releasing myself. Holding on to her cruelty was like drinking salt water. The thirst never ended. So one night, under a wide sky full of stars, I whispered into the dark, I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I do. The words didn't bring thunder or tears, just stillness. And in that stillness, I realized forgiveness isn't surrender. It's closure. 5. 1 year later, on December 1st, 1 year after his death, I drove back to town. The maple tree had grown taller, its branches strong. I brushed snow from the small plaque I'd placed beneath it. For my father, who taught me kindness even when life wasn't kind. I stood there for a long while, breathing the cold air. Somewhere behind me, church bells rang the hour. Life had circled back, as it always does. Before leaving, I took a small folded piece of paper from my pocket, a copy of the obituary I'd written. I slipped it into the soil at the base of the tree. It's complete now, I whispered. Your story's safe. As I walked back to the car, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't need to. The past was behind me, and it was quiet. 6. The quiet kind of justice people often think justice is loud, a courtroom verdict, a public shaming, a dramatic confrontation. But I've learned it's quieter than that. Justice can be the peace of knowing you told the truth and survived. It can be the moment you stop needing the world to understand and start simply living again. My justice wasn't revenge. It was freedom. It was laughter returning in unexpected moments. It was the lightness of walking away from the weight of someone else's lies. I keep one picture of her now, an old one, from before everything went sour. She's smiling at a picnic, hair blowing in the wind. Sometimes I look at it and wonder who she might have been if she'd chosen love over control. Then I put it back in the drawer and go on with my day. Dad would have wanted that dot when evening falls. I sit on the porch and watch the lake shimmer under the moonlight. The world is still imperfect, but for the first time in my life, I don't feel small inside it. I feel steady, and in that calm, I hear his voice. Faint but certain. I knew you'd be okay, kid. I smile, close my eyes, and let the quiet hold me. Because sometimes the truest revenge is simply peace.